Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Destination Marketing Podcast. I'm your host, Adam Stoker. I've got a really fun show for you all today and a great guest that I'll be introducing in just a few minutes. But before I do, I want to start, as I have lately, with a little bit of a discussion where I'll give you my opinions, and then, of course, we'll bring in the guest to talk about it. But one of the things that I've been seeing happen, especially in the content space for the last several months, is something that's now gotten to the level that I feel like I need to kind of talk through it and make sure that everybody that listens to our show understands it. And most of you know that the way I kind of got my start in thought leadership in the destination marketing space was through podcasting, right? I started this podcast now, goodness, 7 years ago. Let's see, 2020. Yep, 7 years ago. This month, actually, we're in May now. And when I started this podcast, I didn't know very much about podcasting or trends or anything like that, but I quickly learned the value of putting owned content at the center of everything you do. This is not another Adam monologue on owned content and why it's important. So don't worry, those of you that are like, oh, I've seen this movie. This is not that movie, okay? I want to talk a little bit specifically about how some things have evolved in media in general and the role of podcasts and other owned content in that shift that's taken place. So let's just go on a little bit of an examination of the timeline of some of this media and talk about where things have gone, and then we'll talk about where they are today. So first of all, podcasts prior to, say, 2016, 2017, for the most part, hadn't really hit critical mass. There were a lot of successful podcasts out there, but I would say the addressable market, if I was going to describe it, the addressable market was people who are willing to listen to podcasts in an audio format. And so what happened there is the audience was relatively limited, and so people that started podcasts, the chances of scale were still very difficult. And then true crime hit the market. I call true crime the gateway drug of podcasting, because once people got into true crime, like Serial, for example, I think almost everybody that listens to podcasts today at some point listened to Serial and was also disappointed with how season 2 wasn't near as interesting as season 1, but I digress. So true crime was kind of that gateway drug to podcasting, and once people were in, they're like, wow, audio is actually a really cool format because I can consume this content while I'm doing other things. It was a multitasker's dream, right? I could go to the gym, but I could learn while I was at the gym, or I could consume content, while I'm driving in the car, and I'm not beholden to the radio station. I can choose the content and listen to a podcast and all of that, right? And then in 2019, that's when of course, everything changed because I got into podcasting, right? And the world was never the same. No, I'm just kidding. But I got into podcasting in 2019, and I had about a year to be in the space before the major change took place that I think really changed the trajectory of just audio as a format in general. And that's that in 2020, at the beginning of 2020, COVID hit. And when COVID hit, suddenly there was a variety of different factors related to COVID that I think really affected podcasting as a medium. Number one is people suddenly had a different relationship with time than they did before. A lot of us found ourselves at home without a commute, for example. And a lot of people were also looking at, COVID had a major impact on everybody's realization that health is really important, and we need to start examining self-improvement, self-betterment, and all of this kind of stuff. And when that happened, podcasts suddenly had this resurgence of relevancy where people who were at home and needed to fill that time with something filled it in a lot of cases with podcasts. And that's one of the things that made audio the format that I really decided to bet on back in the day. And I think I've been really fortunate for making that bet. But just as I observed what was happening back then with audio, I think it's really important to note the shift that's taking place today. Because in 2021, and this also was a little bit of a function of COVID, TikTok also kind of hit critical mass. And there was a lot of people who were on TikTok earlier than that, of course. But again, I think COVID had a major impact on the kind of the TikTokification of content. And all of a sudden, audio as a format, at the time that it was exploding, I don't think audio recognized that the TikTokification of content was going to have a massive impact on how people were consuming content. And so TikTok kind of took this short form video concept and helped it grow at scale, right? And you saw that shortly after TikTok really hit critical mass, Instagram had to release Reels to really keep up with TikTok. And then Facebook released Reels. X released their Reels product. And all of a sudden, short form video content became kind of the leading content asset that was getting the attention of most people. And the other thing that I think really worked for the short form content was this algorithmic formula that based on your interest, the algorithm was going to continue to feed you short form content. And we're thinking about the dopamine, right? Because every time you see something you're interested in, you have about 2 to 5 minutes of content, sometimes less than that. And now you're looking for the next dopamine hit. What's the next thing related to that interest that you can consume? And it's what causes people to keep the TikTok app open or the Instagram Reels app open just over and over and over again for hours scrolling. And the share of attention that these short form video platforms acquired was really, really significant. And it used to be for many years as TikTok and Instagram and Twitter, YouTube Shorts, all of these platforms started to really promote short form video. You would use short form video as your method of getting more views on your podcast or more views or listens on your podcast. And there's been a shift over the last, I would say, 6 to 9 months where instead of those short form videos being the vehicle to get more views or listens on the primary content asset or the content pillar, which would be that podcast or YouTube show or something like that, what's happening now is people are consuming short form content at such a rate that it's actually the shorts that are the content. And so that shift has gotten to the point where this long form content like YouTube shows and podcast episodes or excuse me, podcasts as a format are being created and they still have a ton of value, but the attention is coming through the short form clips and people they're no longer going to watch the entire episode. They may scroll through to see and click through the profile to see another short to finish the small portion of the full story that was in the major content asset, but they're rarely going and consuming the full asset from the short form video. And so that inversion that's happened over the last 6 to 9 months of instead of the clips serving the asset is now starting to serve the clips. And I hope that makes sense, but it's flipped on its head. And now what's getting the attention is the interesting and unique and engaging clips that come from the longer form asset, which sometimes it's a podcast, sometimes it's a YouTube channel. I will say with video becoming as large of a priority as it's become, even a podcast at this point is no longer a podcast. In fact, I would call every asset that has video at the core and it's recurring, this is a show. It's no longer a podcast, it's a show. And I also think that show is now, as we think about how to construct a valuable show, what are the shorts that can come from that show? And that's a new question. It's not what are the shorts that will drive people to the show. It's what are the shorts from the show that are actually going to get attention on the short form video platforms. And if you start thinking about it that way, I think you're going to change the way you're producing some of these assets. I love the fact that over the last 8 years or so, destinations all over the world have launched their own podcasts and shows, and I think it's fantastic. And of course, I've been screaming it from the rooftops now for years. But I think that we're at another inflection point where things are changing, and as I look at the trends and where they're going, we really need to be thinking about what are the short form clips we can get from the asset as opposed to trying to use those clips to drive traffic to the asset. Those are the assets now. And so I think it's really important that everybody think about that. And with that, I think it's a good time for me to bring in Matt Henson. Matt works on our team here at Brand Revolt and runs all of our video production and content. And Matt, I'm really excited to have you join me today.
Thanks for having me, Adam.
Absolutely. So, first of all, Matt, talk to us a little bit about your reaction to the trend that I discussed in my monologue here. Tell me what your thoughts are on that.
This is definitely not me trying to be a suck up, but I think you nailed it. No, I mean that sincerely, though. I think we've seen a serious shift with how we're building content to how can we distribute it far and wide rather than just on one platform. And I think a lot of times with podcasts, we've been so focused on how do we get this out to, how do we get the full show? How do we get the audio file out to as many people as possible? And like you said, we've kind of gone about it backwards, that we're starting to see that reverse of that trend right now, where how do we get this out? Well, actually, how many, and then we try to take derivative content and get people back in. How do we actually capture people at the forefront when they haven't even heard the podcast? They have no interest in listening to your podcast. Now let's create content that captures them there and bring them in. So, you know, what we've seen and what we've done is we've kind of shifted how we outline episodes. We've shifted how we've done a lot of things that way. So yeah, no, I think you nailed it. And that's really the shift I think a lot of shows need to make and a lot of creators need to look. One thing you mentioned in your monologue that I think is really important is that distinction of a podcast from a show. Podcast really allowed anyone to come out and put a microphone in front of your face and talk, and the whole world could hear you. But the mentality shift that takes place when you have a show versus a podcast, a show has this grandiose feeling of like legacy media and a show on TV. And what we've seen is a lot of podcasters who started out with simple podcasts, similar to like just talking to a microphone and distributing, making that shift as well. I think Pat McAfee show is a really great example of that, where they went from his show started out in a kind of dingy basement, and then now it's on a grandiose stage. Like he has this whole set and everything, all the way to the point of like, I think just a couple weeks ago with the kickoff of WWE and WrestleMania, he had a wrestler come in and destroy the set as like a whole thing. And like that shift that we've seen in media and that we've seen in shows and podcasts has made the big difference. And so now what we're talking about, what you just talked about, was how do we get people there without assuming that they want to watch a show? And that's really that's the key here, is make content that drives people to the show before they've seen it, rather than trying to think about how can I make this content, this long form content, assets that can then like, oh, I hope that you can come in and hear and watch the show. It's the reverse of that. And that's a really great trend to see.
Yeah, I think it's really important to talk about why that's happening. So number one, in a long form content asset, you may cover 5 different topics in an episode. Like Pat McAfee show is a great example, but we could even narrow it into my show. I used to bring somebody on from, and I still obviously bring people on from destinations. I would talk about their backstory, and then we would talk about the destination, and then we would talk about the marketing topic that they wanted to discuss, and then we'd usually go on some sort of tangential journey, right, that we hadn't expected in the outline of the show. And then, of course, we'd wrap with kind of what's the takeaway that they're recommending, right? How can you go implement something from this conversation tomorrow? And if you think about that, that is 5 different interests that we tackled over the course of that episode. So in the algorithmic serving function that we're getting in TikTok, Instagram, YouTube Shorts, etc., right? Because of that, those 5 different interests that we tackled within the episode are somewhat mutually exclusive, and they don't show up under the same interest. And so again, I just think it's really critical for us to think about, okay, if we're in this world of algorithmic serving of content, we can no longer think about an episode as a single asset in and of itself. We need to think in terms of interests and categorize our content and shorts in terms of interests and what will they be served with, or what type of content will they serve it to? What people will want to see this type of content? And if we divide it up that way, I think we're going to be much more effective in our episode planning.
I think it's really the ultimate owned media strategy. When you're trying to get an owned audience, why limit yourself to one type of audience by distributing one type of show? if, like you said, if you have 5 different subjects, that's 5 separate individual audiences that you are now able to reach that you would have not been able to reach prior. That's the big shift that takes place. And so now, Adam, your show might reach, I don't know. I should know.
Millions.
This is bad on me.
Millions of people,
right? But let's just say 100,000 people, for example. Like, I know that we made this big format. This is what we're calling DMP 2.0, this big format shift. And I think it's been awesome so far. It's been great. This has allowed, rather than just casting a net to 50,000 people, now we're casting a net to 500,000 people, because now we have a bunch of different areas of people that could be interested in this based off various discussion topics that you have. And that's incredible. It's a great shift.
Well, this is kind of a little behind the scenes for everybody that's listening, right? Like, we saw this trend, and one of the things that the monologue on the front end of this show allowed us to do was create a single clip that's a single interest that allows me to go through kind of this entire topic. And then the discussion that I have with the guest may scratch a couple of different itches, right? As far as topics go or interests go. That's all designed to try to keep up with this trend and make sure that we're staying on the forefront of things. I think everybody that has a show, I'm not just going to say podcast, everybody that has a show needs to start thinking about their episodes in terms of interests covered as opposed to the long form conversation you intended to have.
This is also an area, I think, as much as new media, this is the argument of new media and legacy media a little bit here. New media has had this approach of trying to create a lot of assets from things, but I think one thing that we can look at from legacy media as a lesson here is legacy media, when they had a show on, say, a news network or some large network, the amount of content that they were able to create from just that show allowed them to fuel channels nowadays with tons of feed, rather than, I think in the past, and I think we might have been guilty of this, and I'll just kind of talk about that a little bit too. When we've created a show, we might have gone through and created 3 to 5 assets from one show that was 50 minutes long. But again, not to be a broken record, this shift, looking at different segments, has allowed us to tenfold the number of assets that come out of any given show, because of we're being very intentional about what each part of the show is now, similar to how older shows might have been. And I'm not saying that's like, I'm not going to paint with a broad stroke and say like every podcast and every show's been like that where they haven't been intentional. That's not at all what I'm saying. But it does allow us to be a little bit more fine-tuned with how we approach content, and then also be able to kind of evangelize that to the greater base.
Absolutely. So, Matt, I think it would be helpful at this point to at least give a little bit of your background. I know you've been on the show before, but to give a little bit of your background to those that are listening. How you came here is always one of my favorite stories. And then I'm actually looking at the clock behind your head, and it says the same time that my clock says. Did you already make the move?
I am here as of Friday. I am in Utah, not far from you. Yeah. So that's a big one since the last time I was on. This is a little inside baseball too, but I can't touch the ceiling anymore from a seated position, and that's an amazing thing. If you guys go back and look, I don't know what episode it was, but my head was about this far from the ceiling. No, the story of how you and I met and how I came to Brand Revolt, at the time it was Relic. I met you at the now it's One West, but it was at the time DMA Tech Summit in Salt Lake a couple years ago. And I'd just started a new job there, and we kind of hit it off and started talking with the team. And then through a series of contracting and projects and things, it just seemed to make sense at the timing. And you guys had a need, and I guess I filled that need somehow when you brought me on. Now I'm here in Utah with you guys, so that's pretty exciting.
Really awesome. So you were in Wrangell, Alaska, which I think people probably just think, oh, Alaska, the giant state up there. But tell us about like how remote Wrangell was or is as a city.
Yeah, Wrangell is. So I think most people know where Juneau's at. At the very minimum, you know where Anchorage is at, which is kind of like, if you look at the state, it's kind of in that south center area. If you go down the southeast panhandle of Alaska and you go see Juneau, you keep going down further south, but not quite far as Ketchum, kind of right in between. There's a little island that looks like a bird, about 2,000 people on that island, and there's no road access, 13 miles of paved highway, but but everything is transportation by boat or by airplane. So Alaska Airlines comes through with a kind of a larger jet every day. We get it twice a day, but our fuel comes in by boat, our groceries come in by boat. Just getting down here, I just put all my stuff 2 weeks ahead of time into a shipping container and send it to Seattle, and then fly down and go unload that container and drive it all the way down here from Seattle. So it's definitely a way of living up there. I love it up there. I miss it. Excited to be down here though. But yeah, I was just telling our internal team this morning, I am beyond amazed the produce section at grocery stores. I can't even believe that. And that I have leftovers from takeout from a restaurant nearby. That's news to me too. So excited to be back with the rest of society.
It's the little things, right, Matt? The produce section at the grocery store.
I can pick up a bag of grapes and they're not kind of bad anymore. They're not moldy. You would not believe that is a feat in and of itself.
Big step. Well, I'm excited that you're in Utah, Matt. I think it would be good to have, maybe you share with our listeners too, why is video something that you've really gravitated to as a passion of yours?
So I came from an audio background before. I used to work in a recording studio for a little bit. I produced records. I did a lot of live recordings as well, and it was always fun. Audio is an art form in and of itself. It's often underrated and overlooked in a lot of ways. Video, definitely more people do video than they do audio. But as I got into doing the video, I realized that it's not too dissimilar from audio in a lot of principal things. And so from that, it was kind of an easy thing to be like, oh, audio, video, sure. But what really captivated me was it was an opportunity for me personally through video to be able to tell stories and tell people stories. And that's actually a project I'm working on personally of some important people in my life back in Wrangell. I did a small documentary about that. And so that was the number one thing. And in a lot of things that I've tried to do in my life, I've tried to find a way to give back through what I've been able to do. And so through audio, it was being able to work with people that would otherwise but not be able to get to a recording studio. Let's produce a record. Let's do it. With video, it's been a way to be able to tell stories or go out and be able to tell other people's stories. And in the case of working with Brand Revolt, going out and being able to help businesses do better and reach more people. And so video has captivated me in that way, that it's another beautiful art form, and there's so many more intricacies in the middle of it too, where you can get really deep and in the weeds on stuff, or you can be very surface level, and all of it is good and all of it makes sense and all of it has its purpose.
Well, I mean, that's part of the reason for this conversation. You're the perfect guest to talk through this. And one of the things is we started talking to our different destination clients about this trend that we're seeing and some of the video work that we're doing. We needed somebody to say, okay, if we're rethinking how we're structuring a show so that we're getting more interest-based clips as opposed to just trying to drive everyone to the content asset, we need somebody to pilot this and think it through. And this is one of the great things about our partnership with Visit Myrtle Beach is they are always ready and willing to try something new because they want to be on the front end of what's going on. And I think that's been such a great part of our relationship with them. Tell us about the content asset you've been working on with Myrtle Beach and what that experience has been like and what you see the show shaping out to be. Guys, have you created your profile yet on Tourism IQ? Tourism IQ has become one of the very best resources in the destination marketing industry. You can see all the latest jobs there, and Lori Farr, who many of you may know from when she was doing the travel vertical, she's the editorial director at Tourism IQ, and she puts together all the latest available jobs. She tells us where people have gone when they take a new job. It's called People on the Move. She posts the latest RFPs. We have a lot of thought leadership there from different leaders in the industry. And really, Tourism IQ has become one of the very best places for you to develop professionally in the destination marketing space. It's got all the resources you need, and it's growing every day. We have over 530 active profile users. These are people that have created profiles on the site. And then we have another 2,800 active lookers who haven't created a profile, but they are there consuming the content and revisit the site on an ongoing basis. This site is growing every day. I'm so proud of what it's become, and I need everyone to go create a profile and see the incredible resources that are being posted for our industry on a daily basis. mytourismiq.com is the URL. Please go check it out. Fill out a profile on mytourismiq.com.
Yeah, and this is actually a really great project and a really cool project to work on. Myrtle Beach Visit Myrtle Beach, that is, identified that they wanted to find a way to reach stakeholders and provide more value to their stakeholders. And so what better way than to, in a similar format to a podcast, like a show, feature each of their stakeholders in vignettes. And so we've looked at, with them, outlining several different areas of the beach, of Myrtle Beach, that could be featured, and where there's a myriad of different types of stakeholders within categories. And that's putting it very simply. It's a little bit more nuanced than that. But for instance, Myrtle Beach is the mini golf capital of the world. You'd be remiss to not do an episode about mini golf and talk about all the different people that are a part of it. Talk about the companies, talk about the legacy there. I'm not Sports Illustrated started in Myrtle Beach. That was pretty nuts. I did not realize that.
I didn't know that either.
So yeah, it started I can't remember which stakeholder it was. That's shame on me, but it was incredible to know either way. But what it's done is that the way the Myrtle Beach team approached, and the way that I've been able to collaborate with them on this too, is that let's look at each individual stakeholder as an opportunity to have their own piece of content. We'll have a long interview, 5 to 10 minutes or so, and then a number of short form clips that come out of that. And then from that vignette, let's go ahead and let's stack all the vignettes together. Let's create one longer piece of content. And so now what we've done is we've funneled things down from a long piece to individual segments that can be broken out to individual social assets that can come out. If I'm thinking in organic social media terms, that fuels a feed for weeks, if not months, from one episode. So, and that's one of the beautiful and brilliant things that Myrtle Beach did, was they looked at this and said, we want to provide value. Let's create the most amount of content, but let's also still create that parent piece of content that supports the whole thing and ties the story together. And so as we've been going through that, we've been developing, we're working with an awesome production partner down there, and they've been able to go through and they've done their on-site location. We've talked about this thing that I think I might have coined the term environmental audio, where it's looking at how do we still create a show that is audio first, but video second, but still has a strong video component, but you don't lose anything in the details with the audio, where there might have been a visual to support that. So environmental audio was like, let's go out and get waves lapping on the shore. Let's go get seagulls. Let's go get, glasses clinking at one of their local mini golf places at the bar. So there's like a number of things that we could do that we could support the show that way in a creative way, where you don't lose any of the detail if you decide to watch it or if you decide to listen to it. And so as we've gone through that, we've developed that. And I think one thing that's super important to point out here is that we went into this show with an idea of kind of what the Myrtle Beach team wanted and what I kind of had interpreted. And then it's developed since then. And now it's turned into a little bit of a different show than we all started with. And so I'm really thankful that the Myrtle Beach team has been very open to these changes, and we've all kind of flexed and adapted and pivoted as we needed to. But I think what it's done is really turned into a really great show. And actually, after we get done with this, I'm going to be reviewing the full length. So I'm excited to see what our team's put together.
Awesome. It's really fascinating to hear the different approach and how we're creating, yes, still the long form content asset, but we're intentionally structuring the video vignettes to be really versatile for the different stakeholders, right? Like, I think that's a really unique approach. Yeah. I want you to talk a little bit about how the idea has evolved, because one of the things that I love about creating shows is the hypothesis of what the show is going to be is never what the finished product actually becomes, because we all, in the trial and error process and seeing what's going to resonate or seeing what feels good to the people that are participating in the show or whatever it is, you always uncover these Easter eggs that are just like, yeah, that was never going to work, or, oh my gosh, this needs to be the center of the show, or whatever. So tell me a little bit about some of the things that you uncovered that led to the evolution.
Absolutely. I think the big one was that we had put arbitrarily a little bit of a limit on how long each vignette should be, and in a goal or in an attempt to have a certain number of vignettes in one episode, and then from that the vignettes had to be a certain length. We got into recording, and I mean, there were some great people we got to talk to in Myrtle Beach, and there was no way that we could say, okay, this is a 15-minute interview, let's cut this down to 3 minutes, and let's still make sure that we can capture it. Absolutely not. And that doesn't do if we're trying to provide value to stakeholders, how does that provide value? And that's one of the things that we always had to ask that question, put all of our decisions against was, does this actually tell the story of people at the beach? And the show is Myrtle Beach Faces and Places. There are Myrtle Moments, Myrtle Moments Faces and Places. How do you have moments that add value to faces and places if you're going to cut out all the value that they added in their own dialogue? And so, I think we had a meeting a couple weeks back. We're like, you know what? Let's just make sure we actually do the interview justice. It doesn't matter if it's 15 minutes, if it's 5 minutes, if it's 3 minutes. Who cares what that is? Tell the story the way the story should. And maybe the full length version's a little bit shorter and a little abbreviated, but now we have that opportunity again. This goes back to that own media strategy. Let's put the full length out on YouTube as an individual thing. And let's also do the social assets, and that all starts to feel things together. And so that might have been the biggest development in the show that we saw. I think also being able to look at the extensive list of partners that Myrtle Beach has, and that this might have been the hardest part of trying to whittle down, like, who will fit these specific areas that we're looking for the best. And not that any one was better than the other, but for our purposes here, here's who we think might be able to tell this part of the story. And so that was interesting to also kind of navigate with the team too. And we worked very closely with the Myrtle Beach team to make sure that was taken care of very, very well and very delicately. So, I mean, there's been a lot of really cool learning moments there. And also, again, working with a third-party production partner, that adds a whole other element, another variable in the middle of it too. And there's a lot of creative feedback that comes back and forth between myself and them that also has shaped the show. And then we present it back to Myrtle Beach, and then it kind of becomes this giant circuit.
Yeah. Why is there a third party involved? I think those that are listening might be like, wait, hold on. There's Brand Revolt's involved. The Myrtle Beach team's involved. Why is there a third party? But I actually think it's one of the critical things that makes this successful.
Absolutely. Well, number one, being in Alaska doesn't allow me to get out to Myrtle Beach very often, even in Utah still. But when you're talking to locals, and this is I think where I have had some experience in this working at the DMO in Wrangell. Locals want to talk to locals. And so being able to find a production partner that is a local, born and raised in Myrtle Beach, people open up a lot more to someone else that has shared experiences with them rather than some random Joe like me coming in saying, hey, let's talk about you. They're not as willing to open up. And so having a local production partner, one that knows the area, one that knows how to approach all these different stakeholders, that's critical in order for the success of this type of show. And so, the company we're working down there with, the owner of the company, he's incredible. He's a really great guy. He's just very personable. All of his emails are, honestly, they're kind of the highlight of the week. They're also very personal and just jokey. But also, I mean, the product is phenomenal, and we're really excited to continue to work with him. But that local feel also is driven home through there. And that's one of the I guess, another learned thing from the show is that we were looking for a voice actor to go and do the VOs. But if he's going to conduct the interviews, why don't you have a local voice tell the local story all the way through, and then you have that local through line? I said local a lot. It's important here, and that's honestly changed the feel of the show in a really great way.
I love it. So Matt, as you look forward, I mean, you started in audio, like you said. You gained a passion for video and have really helped us add video as a product to our organization in a way that we never had before. Where do you see this going? Like, as far as content and media, where do you think it goes from here?
I think we start looking at this is my personal goal, right? I mean, I hope this aligns with the agency selfishly, but I see this going where we look at how do we reapproach shows outside of the podcast realm, and how do we go about creating content in a way that, like we do with podcasts right now, but longer, made for TV maybe style pieces of content that fuel social channels. Here's the thing, if we're looking for organic social media channels to be full and we're worried about not having a lot of content, investment into longer form pieces of content that you are building in a way that you can break out, like we just talked about with Myrtle Moments, all the way down, that is the future of creating long form content in shows. So if I were to say, what's the takeaway? What's the future? Obviously, I can't tell you because things things shift all the time in the media space. But and this is something I could touch on more, but I've been able to have the luxury and the pleasure of working with CBS Sports on occasion, and what I see there and what I see constantly happening, and this just confirms what we do here, right? What I see is a lot of people going out, shooting a lot of social, and immediately going right back to the media room, uploading that immediately. We're going to thumbs up that because that's definitely important.
That's for the YouTube audience.
Yep, that's for YouTube. But social-driven content to engage with longer-form pieces, driving people back to the long-form content first, rather than trying to think that the long-form is going to have derivative. It goes back to what you said at the beginning. That's probably the best way to say it. And I at risk of saying it worse than you did it, because I thought you said it pretty well, that is the direction we're going. We need to look at how short-form content drives back to the parent piece rather than the parent piece, assuming that we're going to get an audience with that and then hopefully keep their attention with short-form. That's really what I see as a future.
And is AI video ever going to replace point and shoot?
Right now, no. Ever? I'd say in some cases it could. I'd say it also has to be a very specific case. I think we've seen Coca-Cola try to do these things, and we've seen a lot of ads around the Super Bowl try to go and approach that, and audiences aren't really ready for that. And personally, I don't know if they ever will be. I think there's always going to be a human touch, and maybe that's just, I might be on the minority on this, but a human touch, I think, will always outshine AI in every single way. So I think no matter how advanced AI gets, point and shoot, you're always going to want someone behind the camera, an actual human behind the camera, to make that content really come to life.
Can I give you my Jetsons prediction here?
I'd love to hear it.
So I think humans will always need to plan the video content. However, I think we're going to hit a point where drones and robots and they're going to be AI enabled, where the human maybe plans the shoot, but instead of sending a human to go shoot the content, or instead of sending a production firm to go do it, or a freelancer or whatever it is, you're contracting with a robot, right? And the robot's going to go shoot the content, arrange to do the interview, all of that kind of stuff. Because I don't think you can ever, especially in tourism and travel, you don't want to see a representation. This is the reason the metaverse never took off, okay?
Right.
You don't want to see a representation of what it's going to be like. You want to see what it's going to be like. And I don't think that's ever going away. I think first-person camera shots are always going to be there. How we gather those shots is probably going to continue to evolve, and AI is going to play a major part in that. But I don't think renderings or representations of a travel experience are ever going to overtake the real thing.
I agree with that for sure. One thing I'll say too to that is, as camera gear has become more accessible to the everyday person, the stock libraries that are available online right now have become flooded with great quality content from great quality creators. And so there might be an instance one day where we have so much content of a certain area that we don't actually even need to go out and shoot new content. We'll just have libraries and libraries and libraries of content that we can all pull from. And so, yeah, I do agree with your Jetsons approach there. I do agree with that.
Awesome. Matt, anything I didn't ask you that I should have?
I like Utah, if you were curious. So far it's warm. I need to buy some warm weather clothes, but that's about it.
Awesome. Well, it's good to have you here, Matt. Really excited, and I appreciate you coming on and joining us on the show today.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Yeah, if people want to learn more about you, ask you questions, ask you more about Wrangell and what it was like to move from Wrangell to Utah, what's the best way for them to get a hold of you?
LinkedIn's great. Matt Henson, you'll probably see me. I'm standing there in a suit and tie in front of the Capitol building, so you can't miss that one, but that's probably the best way to get in touch with me.
Awesome. Matt, thanks a lot. Really appreciate it.
Thanks so much.
And thanks everybody for listening. If you enjoyed today's episode, please don't forget to leave us a rating or a review. It helps us continue to bring you amazing guests like Matt. Thanks everybody, and have a great week. Guys, I'm pretty excited. I think I've struck a nerve with something, and we've been talking a lot. You've heard on this show talking about the need for people to go from tactician to strategist. That's an effort that we've been working on inside of Brand Revolt for a long time. And one of the components of that is recognizing that the traditional agency of record engagement isn't exactly what we want to be chasing, because everybody's kind of chasing the same thing. We've found a really interesting success point with conversations where I've gone to destinations and I've said, hey, what's the unique challenge that you've wanted to solve for a long time, but your AOR hasn't had the chance to get to it, or that you and your team haven't had a chance to get to it? And it's resulted in some of the most fun and intellectually challenging conversations that I've had so far. We've had one destination that's got us building a LinkedIn strategy. Another destination asked for a corporate partnerships strategy. Another one asked us to build a Reddit strategy. And in exploring these different strategies that need to be developed, especially with all the changes that are happening in the world, there's not a destination out there that doesn't have one or two things that they haven't been able to tackle yet. And for us as an organization at Brand Revolt, we really are finding a lot of joy and excitement in the opportunity to tackle some of these problems and blaze trails that haven't yet been blazed. And so I wanted to invite all of you, if there's that nagging issue, that thing you've wanted to get to for a couple of years, but you just haven't had time to solve it, or if there's something that maybe one of your directors or C-level people have been asking you to solve, but it's been on your list, you haven't been able to get to it, or maybe an agency hasn't gotten you what you needed yet with that specific thing, give us a narrow strategy project opportunity, and I'm extremely confident that my team can really help dig into that without having to turn over the keys of the entire marketing plan to this agency. Instead, we can really tackle that narrow strategy for you and make sure that it's something that's effective, solves the problem, and can be built upon for the future. If this sounds interesting to you, hit me up at adam@thebrandrevolt.com. I would love to talk to you. I know that every single destination has something like this that they just need to get to, and I think we can help. adam@thebrandrevolt.com.